Today we will be learning about athlete idolization throughout history. Alright, so let's start off with a little mental exercise. So, who is the GOAT here, or the greatest of all time? So, you might have immediately recognized these two athletes, or at least one of them. The one on the left is LeBron James, and the one on the right is Michael Jordan. And basketball fans and general sports fans alike debate about which one of them is the GOAT, or the greatest of all time. Similarly, these two players, Patrick Mahomes on the left and Tom Brady on the right, are also the subject of many debates about which one will be, or already is, the GOAT. And so, what did this teach us? What did this little exercise indicate to us about idolization of athletes? Well, firstly, if you recognize these athletes, you already idolize them. And secondly, if you at least are debating about which one's the GOAT or have an opinion, that's evidence of further idolization. And so idolization can come in very obvious ways. So in this example, this is the Atlanta Falcons Ring of Honor, where they quite literally are putting their players on a wall plastered with their number, their achievements, and their likeness in order to celebrate their time with the team, to celebrate their achievements, and to celebrate the dedication that they showed toward the franchise. And it also can come in jersey retirements, where you're raising someone's jersey high up above the masses so that they can admire and remember what that person did for your franchise and what that person did for your team. And this is quite literally a raising someone's jersey above the crowd, showing that they are distinct and unique, but it is also a symbolic honor, as you're just showing that you're reverence for this person, also your respect for the dedication and time that they put in to learn their sport, and the dedication and time that they took to excel. And so, in order to understand all of these factors in modern times, we really need to take a picture and look at ancient Greece. And so, let's start off with a couple of basics. And so, this is obviously a vase depicting two Greek boxers, and these may be Olympians or they may be people having a scuffle, but if they're famous athletes, we have no idea who they are. You cannot make out their facial features. Here's another one, it's not unique. You can't tell who's who, and especially the two guards on the perimeter, you can't tell who those guys are at all. And because of this is really a celebration of the sport rather than of the athlete. And moving on, we can actually see in Greece a idolization of an athlete in a quite literal way. So this is a statue of Theogenes of Thasos, and he was a boxer from Thasos who competed in many Olympics and had 1,400 wins over his career. He was an incredible boxer, and because of his dedication to the sport and his dedication to putting the city's name up on that pedestal with him whenever he won an Olympic an Olympic laurel, the city rewarded him by making him into a healing god after his career was over, and they made this statue of him in order to commemorate that. And so, quite literally, an athlete is being worshipped by an entire city for his deeds in the field, for his deeds boxing, and for his deeds that he did for the city. His representation of the city is being rewarded because of his athletic accomplishments. And so moving on, we can look at another example in ancient Rome, where we can look at gladiators. So this first example is a mosaic, and obviously mosaics take time, and so whatever you're going to put into a mosaic should be pretty important. And so this is glorification of the sport of gladiatorial combat, but it is also glorification of the gladiator, as for one of the first times we can actually make out the face of the athlete on the right. And his distinctive features might clue us in as to who he is if you were more familiar as a Roman onlooker. We can also see a more obvious example in the Colchester vase, and so the Colchester vase looks like those of early Greece, except it's much more detailed, and there's also a distinctive feature that gives it an edge. Specifically, this is the names of the athletes on the vase, and so we have Memnon, the Secutor, and Valentinius the Rhetarius. And so the Secutor and Rhetarius are just their gladiatorial type, their gladiatorial equipment. And by the way, if you see a swastika on Memnon's shield, that is not a Nazi symbol, but it is rather more of a, before it got that connotation, it was a symbol of Jewish pride. And so back to what I was talking about. Sorry. Memnon and Valentinius, we know their names, which is incredibly important because they're not just slaves sent to die in an arena as gladiators for entertainment, but rather they are athletes that we can honor, and we honor with this vase. No one would take any time to make such detailed art creation and put an athlete's name on it unless they were respected. And so it's because of this that we can clearly see that 1, gladiators were respected, and 2, Romans idolized their athletes. And we can also see this in other busts and statues, such as Imprombius, another secutor. We can see his name at the bottom of the bust. So this is a quote that specifically tells us how important and idolized gladiators were. And so this is from Valerius Maximus. I'll read it out loud. So, following the example of no previous general, with teachers summoned from the gladiatorial training school of C. Aurelius Scaurus, implanted in the legions a more sophisticated method of avoiding and dealing a blow, and mixed bravery with skill, and skill back again with virtue, so that skill became stronger by bravery's passion, and passion became more wary with the knowledge of this art. And so this is kind of a very poetic and beautiful way of essentially saying gladiators are brave, they're skillful, they're strong, they're passionate, and they have sophisticated fighting measures. And so the fact that the Roman army is calling on a gladiator to go and teach them training methods is huge, because it shows how respected these men were. They weren't just dogs thrown in an arena to fight. And so we can also see gladiators being honored after death. And so these 2 gladiators have won many fights, as they have wreaths on their tombs, and their names also adorn their tombs, showing that they are not just nameless creatures that are fighting in an arena, but are rather respected athletes that somebody took the time to make a tomb for. And so these athletes are being honored even though they are slaves. And so next we have feudal Europe, where we see many examples of knights being honored. And so you may say, oh, a knight was a soldier, they weren't an athlete. But that's simply not true. The greatest example is Sir William Marshall, who rarely ever went into combat, but rather had 500 tournament captures. And in feudal tournaments, he was an absolute beast. He was racking up captures left and right, jousting, etc., but he saw combat very little. And so William Marshall, and on this plaque he is called the greatest knight, for him to be called that is tremendous, because he wasn't a fighter, but rather an athlete. And so this shows us how medieval society, lords and peasants, they loved their knights not just for their military prowess, but also for their dedication to the sport of combat. And that's very similar to gladiators, but it's a distinctive change, because whereas a gladiator is a slave, we are now seeing the noble men be honored, and noble men being honored and entering combat sports. And so now let's move on to the modern examples. So this is a picture of one of the first ever baseball cards made in 1871. And so we can see on the bottom here, the sponsor is Old Judge Gypsy and Gypsy Queen cigarettes. And so this shows that's the start of merchandising. And this is really a theme in modern sports. We're beginning to see the mass production of cards like this, of jerseys, of helmets, of balls. And of all these things, it's really just about merchandising and mobilizing that industrial power. And so in the modern day, we can see many more baseball cards being mass-produced and created in order to fulfill that need of honoring our athletes on a baseball card. And so Babe Ruth is probably the greatest example of this. Babe Ruth was a famous baseball player, many people know him, and he was one of the people that forged baseball into the American pastime. And he's pictured here right next to his baseball card. And his baseball card was essentially a piece of Babe Ruth that his fans could hold. And so this merchandising brings fans a lot closer to their athletes than they ever were. In ancient Greece, you couldn't get into the Olympiad to watch Theogenes of Thasos unless you were noble, unless you were a man, and 2, a trainer. And so, in reality, it's the beginning of an opening of sports to an inclusive audience, rather than an exclusive one of high-ranking nobles or a bunch of other lords. And so, I would like you to quickly guess how much this football is worth. You might be saying, oh, about $20, about $50, but oh, it's an NFL ball, so it's probably worth about $200. But no, this is Tom Brady's final touchdown ball, which sold for $518,000. and he later unretired, so it is now worthless, but luckily the buyer is being refunded. But this is just showing how even if Tom Brady, an idol by many people, touched this ball, it is now skyrocketed in value because of its place in that game and because of its role in Tom Brady's life, and people want to get closer to that. And jerseys allow them to do that. And so this is a graph of the top-selling jerseys. We have Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, Jason Tatum, James Harden, and Kevin Durant. I'll exclude Ben Simmons due to his recent poor play. But many of these people, you probably know at least one of these names. It's probably Curry or LeBron. And so these names are huge, and these names being the best-selling jerseys makes sense as people want to get close to the best athletes in any sport. But what a jersey allows you to do is wear a part of that player. I'm wearing what the player wears. I'm looking how they look, and I'm also with a concourse of other fans that are also doing the same thing. It's about that community and about making those connections. And so let's specifically talk about what a jersey means in modern times. There weren't jerseys with knights, there weren't jerseys with gladiators, and there weren't jerseys with Olympians. It's a distinct thing to the modern day. And so what a jersey does, it's essentially a piece of that player, but it's not a piece of that player that stays with them. It's a photocopy or a capture, a picture of a time in which that player wore that jersey. And so here we can just follow LeBron James' career from the Heat to the Cavaliers to the Lakers. And so we can clearly see that LeBron has bounced around the league, number one, but we can also see that LeBron has played for all of these teams. He's dedicated that blood, sweat, and tears, and many people can have either one of these jerseys, and it's still a LeBron jersey. And it's very distinct from what we've had in previous years, or in previous centuries, where you couldn't really get this close to a player. You couldn't really support that player without, patronizing them, giving them a amount of money, being a patron of that knight, or being a patron of that gladiator. But now we're able to support players just by buying a jersey and wearing it. It's very enjoyable for us. And so this brings me back to the kind of exaltation of jerseys. And jerseys are essentially a representation of that player's dedication, commitment, and to the sport, but also to the franchise. And so here we have Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, etc. And they're all being recognized for the incredible amount of work that they put in to get the Lakers to championships and to get the Lakers wins. And the fans are appreciative, the franchise is appreciative, and they're exalting them because not only did they excel at their sport, but they excelled in the league and they excelled on the team to the point where they get this distinct honor that not everybody gets, clearly. And we can also see this in many other sports. This is specifically a hockey. We can also see the symbolism of putting it closer to the ceiling. Not only this closer to the concept of God, but this is also just above the masses. They're separated from the current players, and they're separated from the crowds of people that look down on or up on them from below. And so this is very distinctive, and we've never really seen anything like this before outside of statues, but a jersey is something very distinct that gives us an identity of a player, not only giving us their name, but their number, but also that representation of all the work that they put in to get there. And so let's talk about what is the impact of all this. So specifically, this is the NFL's on average team revenue over the years. And I included the first fantasy football app just to kind of continue on this idolization train. And so fantasy football in and of itself is kind of an idolization treasure trove. It's just you're picking up players that you think will do well, you're picking up players that you like, and you're putting them on your own team. You're making your own team of your favorite athletes or the athletes you think will perform. And we can clearly see that after the first fantasy football app was launched by the NFL, revenue skyrocketed, and it went up not just by $1 billion, but by $2 billion in a matter of 2 years. And this is absolutely ridiculous, but it also demonstrates that fans want to get close to their players. They want to see their players play, but they also want to have a little skin in the game. And so let's move on to Cristiano Ronaldo. Cristiano Ronaldo is an example of an insanely popular athlete. Specifically, we can look at his Instagram following at nearly 450 million, which is more Instagram followers than 99% of countries have population. There are only 2 countries in China and India who have more citizens than Cristiano Ronaldo has followers on Instagram. And so what did this all do for Cristiano Ronaldo? How did he get rewarded? Well, he got a lifetime endorsement deal worth $1 billion with Nike. And that's ridiculous. It's an insane amount of money for an athlete to be making. And we can also look back at this picture, but specifically LeBron. And so what did LeBron get out of being essentially the face of basketball for the past 2 decades? Well, he's obviously gotten a lot of fame, he's gotten a lot of championships, specifically 4, and he's done a lot that we will remember, such as Space Jam 2. But he also got a lifetime endorsement deal with Nike that is set to exceed $1 billion over his lifetime. And so, once again, we're seeing an athlete rewarded insane amounts of money for excelling at their sport. And so, what did we really learn today? What's the link? What is sports idolization throughout history? Well, we've learned that we've always been doing it. We've always been putting athletes on pedestals, whether they be Theogenes of Thasos, a noble, or whether they be slaves that are pitted into an arena to fight. We've always honored people that are willing to go that far to exceed and excel in their sports. We've done it with knights, and now we're doing it with merchandise. We merchandise, and we merchandise. And some people make the argument that merchandisation of sports is harming the sport or degrading the athletes, but I would argue that it's a really good thing. So let's look back at this picture, and I know I've used it a lot, but what do you see in the background? It's just faceless people. These people have been deliberately blurred out of the image to show LeBron. And of course, this is a reasonable thing to do in order to focus on the athlete, but many of us in our daily lives feel like the people on the edges of this image. Our face is blurred, we're nameless, we're faceless, and nobody cares who we are. But when we don that jersey, we join a community, like in this image, where everyone's in focus. You can see everyone's face, see everybody's clothing, and see everybody's facial reaction to what's going on the court. And so when you don that jersey, when you join that team, you are now a part of something that's bigger than yourself, and you can go watch it, you can go enjoy it, and you can go be a part of a team rather than just of yourself. And so this brings me back to that idolization, putting athletes on a pedestal. Because, in a sense, athletes put humanity on a pedestal. They push boundaries, they try to do the best they can in everything that they do, and they push past what we think is possible. And it's because of this we are completely justified in elevating them to the status that we have given them. They're the best of the best and the best of even more. And so, because of this, athlete idolization, I would argue, is an excellent thing because it shows us that there is a reward for going the extra mile and pulling yourself all the way up to the top. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. If you liked this video, please subscribe. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so I can start to edit my YouTube shorts. Furthermore, check out my other videos. I'm going to be posting more and more as the summer approaches, and I will have more free time. But thank you for watching again. Please subscribe, like, and put on notifications. I appreciate you all for watching and appreciate you for listening this thus far.